Good morning, everyone. I wake you up that one? My name is Lee Foddison. I'm the executive director with the Gateway to Milwaukee. Show of hands, who's familiar with the Gateway to Milwaukee? Outside of the email invite that you got. Okay, we have some people. That's good. So we've been around since about 2005. We started as a business association and we kind of grew from there. We formed a business improvement district here on the airport area. And ever since, we've been working to kind of beautify the area through landscaping and beautification, infrastructure development, safety and security improvements, and trainings and seminars, as well as economic development with the businesses, business development, and other resources that may come along. Something that's been really popular, and I don't know whether to say whether it's unfortunate or not, has been our active shooter training, which I believe this is our third or fourth year, and we always get more and more people involved, and I think we had at least 100 people confirmed for today, so we're excited about that. This has been an opportunity for us to outreach not only to the businesses that we work with all the time, but residents in the area, faith-based community, other nonprofits, anyone that's interested in kind of learning more about what could take place and how they could react in those situations. So we're happy to invite everyone to this today. Hot in here. Best Western, I want to thank Mark Johnson as always. He's been a great host for these events. Great location to have this type of training. I want to say first, before we jump into the introduction, I'll do a plug on a couple of grants that we have. So for those businesses that may be within our district, within the airport district, our northern border is approximately Howard. Our southern border is College. Western border is 20th. And our eastern border is St. Francis City Line. So if your business is within that district, you likely then have access to two different grants that we offer. So one is a property beautification grant. It covers all the things that you would probably assume on the exterior of your property, particularly street facing, that would improve the look and feel and function of your property, as well as a safety and security grant that also offers funds towards security on that building, things like lighting, cameras, security system alarms, even windows, doors, anything that's going to help secure your property and your customers and your staff. So I'll do that plug. If you want an application or are interested more about it, you can go to the table outside where Lori, our marketing director, will be, and she put this event together. So we'll be thanking her after the event for putting this great thing together for us. With that said, I've plugged enough of the Gateway. I would like to invite a person here from UMOS who has about 7 years in the social service field. He's worked with, from what I understand, the homeless population, people that have been in and found themselves in human trafficking and other kinds of
stations and truck stops and restaurants and medical clinics and all of these things that traffickers may bring victims in or interact with or pass through. So a goal of our program is to create that exposure and help professionals and community members at large say, hey, there's something not right in that situation. Let me properly learn how to refer and make the call and identify a victim. So then just moving along here. So these are our definitions of trafficking, both sex and labor trafficking, and these are federal definitions. So the reason that the federal definitions are important is because when you are, looking at a possible case of trafficking and you're saying, hey, we think we have human trafficking going on, and you're advocating to law enforcement or to some other entity that this person is a victim of trafficking and they need justice in some sort of way, they'll look at the case through this lens, so these definitions. So sex trafficking is the recruitment, the harboring, the transportation, the provision, the obtaining, the patronizing, or soliciting of a person for the purposes of a commercial sex act, in which the commercial sex act is induced by force, fraud, or coercion, which I'll talk about in a bit. And then here is the disclaimer on this. Any person engaging in commercial sex under the age of 18 is automatically seen as a victim of trafficking. So there's no such thing as a child prostitute or something like that. And commercial sex is basically, it can be sex in exchange for money or anything of value. So that could be food, that could be shelter, some type of goods or whatever the case may be, sex in exchange for something of value. And then on the labor side, have you guys heard a lot about labor trafficking or been exposed to that a bit? Okay. And then on the labor side, it's kind of the same concept as far as some of the recruitment and some of the forced fraud and coercion goes. But it's the recruitment, the harboring, transportation, obtaining of a person for labor services. So it's recruitment, there's fraud involved, there's things involved for the purpose of labor servitude or domestic servitude or something along those lines. And these are happening kind of in a wide variety of industries. A lot of times these two overlap. It may be a labor case, and then it turns out it's a sex trafficking case, or both. So, any questions or comments on this?
Only for people under 18 it would be considered sex trafficking, given like if you have somebody who's a minor and they turn 18, they're kind of stuck in the system.
Right.
And so if they're older than 18, it's not considered sex trafficking, or how do you handle that?
Yeah, so anyone under the age of 18, you don't have to, like if they're trading sex for any type of commercial good or money, you don't have to prove that they're a victim of trafficking. It's assumed because they're a minor. Once they turn 18, there's other elements, which I'll talk about in a bit, that need to be present for it to be labeled human trafficking. But if they're under 18 and if they're trading sex for anything of value or money, it's human trafficking. Does that make sense? And then on the labor trafficking side, when it comes to minors, it's a little more complicated. Obviously, there's some labor laws regarding minors and stuff like that, but I don't think we understand the full scope of the minor issue when it comes to labor trafficking quite yet. But and then those elements that need to be necessary, here they are. This is the AMP model. Have you guys ever seen this before, the AMP model? So for a human trafficking case to be a human trafficking case, you need an action, a means, and a purpose for the case. So that could be, the action could be recruitment, it could be transporting, it could be obtaining a person by force, fraud, and coercion, which I'll talk about in a bit, for the purposes of commercial sex or involuntary servitude or something like that. So this is how it breaks down a bit more. So let's say someone could be recruited and the person is posing as an intimate partner or something like that, or a spouse, and then eventually that, they turn out that the romantic relationship isn't such, it's not legitimate, and that's for the purpose of commercial sex. Well, you have something from all three kind of pillars, so it's a human trafficking case. It could be recruiting by some fraud or maybe some under-hidden fees on the labor trafficking side for the purpose of labor services. So this is just kind of how each kind of scenario fleshes itself out in order to prove human trafficking, except if it's a sex trafficking minor who's engaging in commercial sex. They're automatically a victim. And then here are some elements of force, fraud, and coercion. So that's action means purpose, force, fraud, and coercion. Those are the kind of terms you'll hear and you'll see when it comes to trafficking. And this is kind of how those flesh themselves out. So force could be any of these things and more, really. So a lot of isolation, drug addiction, forced drug addiction, kidnapping, intimidation, maybe some threats of deportation or threats of violence against one's family. And then the fraud side, recruited through false promises, maybe a false relationship. They're often a certain job and then made to do something else. And then the coercion is a little more complicated. Threats of deportation, blacklisting, threats of serious harm against family. So you kind of need each of these elements as well. There kind of needs to be some force and fraud and coercion, and it kind of needs to be weeded out in order for people to say, okay, this is human trafficking. So here are some vulnerabilities that we've seen on the sex trafficking side. So in Milwaukee, runaway youth is a big one. So we'll talk about a case in a bit that our center saw of a runaway youth in Milwaukee. The sex industry, those working in the sex trade or sex work are vulnerable to trafficking. Street homelessness, lower income neighborhoods, There might be a normalization of sex work or sex exploitation within a family. Someone posing as an intimate partner or someone posing to take care of a person, all would kind of lend themselves to being vulnerabilities to sex trafficking. And then on the labor side, we have a good guest worker visa program. Here in Wisconsin, we bring a lot of guest workers, foreign guest workers in from a variety of countries for a variety of different visas and work. That's been a platform, although it's a legitimate visa program, that's been a platform to exploit people for labor services. The undocumented community is at risk. Again, street homelessness, restaurants, the hospitality industry we've seen as well. So here are some vulnerabilities on the labor side. And then just breaking that down a bit more, this is our guest worker visa program. So there's a few different types of visas. So an H-2A visa is an agricultural visa. Our center right now has a caseload of like a dozen Mexican foreign national men who were here on an H-2A agricultural visa and then exploited through labor. And there were some other things going on as well. And then H-2B visa is basically everybody else but a H-2A. So if you go to the Dells, your lifeguards, they might be Europeans or something like that, some type of foreign national coming in to work on an H-2B visa. And then H-1 visa is just like a specialty occupation. So these are kind of the main two. Wisconsin brings in a ton of both, and the way that it's set up lends itself to vulnerability to trafficking in a variety of ways. And there's some kind of policy issues around that, but it's just kind of the reality as we stand now. And then here are some indicators of labor trafficking. So we're talking about learning to spot indicators, learning to build the capacity of what we see and what we may see as trafficking. And here are some kind of physical and as well as general indicators of trafficking, and we'll kind of unpack these a little more. On the physical side, like dehydration, lack of routine screening, regular care, overall poor kind of health care, poor dental care, injuries related from harmful exposure to chemicals. Another one is for kind of our hotel folks in the room or just anybody in the room. A lot of times like more rehearsed answers. So maybe you have a group of workers or somebody who's staying at your hotel or whatever the case may be, and you're asking where they're from or what they're doing in town, and it seems like all of their answers are rehearsed or some type of, or maybe suspicious in general. Not to say that constitutes labor trafficking or there's something going on, but it's just kind of it's an indicator to kind of maybe learn more info from there. So, and then lack of identification, like I said, rehearsed answers to questions, lack of knowledge of whereabouts. So a lot of times, victims will not know where they are. They may not know what Wisconsin is, what Milwaukee is. They're just kind of out of sorts in general, and they may not have a good grip on if they were to be able to leave their situation, where would they go, where's the bus station, all of those things. So these are just some kind of general indicators of labor trafficking. Again, this doesn't each one by itself doesn't say, oh my gosh, they're a victim of trafficking. But it's just about kind of knowing the signs to say, hey, what questions do I ask to learn more, or who do I call to learn more information? And then this is a case study that we saw in Milwaukee. So this was at a restaurant on Milwaukee's South Side. And Leticia, obviously her name is protected, but Leticia had just started working at a local Mexican restaurant, being like a waitress or hostess, where she was being paid on a table. She was hired under the impression that she would work 25 to 30 hours and make minimum wage in addition to tips. And instead, Leticia started working more, working daily, and sometimes over 50 to 60 hours. Again, this is not, this portion is not, okay, she's starting to work more. She's being paid on her table, which is not uncommon in a restaurant setting. She's being asked to work more, okay. But again, learning more information. The supervisor was regularly cheating her out of tips. And it also accused her of stealing from the restaurant and threatening to call the police and immigration since she was undocumented as well as her family. And then the boss has since started to force her and another girl to stay late and serve drinks after closing to paying customers, and is even obligated to accept drinks and shots of alcohol from these kind of VIP customers. So the restaurant would function as a restaurant, and then after hours it would turn into a nightclub setting, and then Leticia was forced to kind of stay and participate in that. She was often groped and fondled by older men while she was waitressing and being forced to dance and things like that. And then Leticia was afraid to speak out because of the threats of deportation, the immigration threats. The boss had pictures of her on men's laps that she was threatening to show to the public and to her family and stuff like that. So she was really kind of trapped, in this situation. And it started off as a strictly kind of labor case. There's some garnished wages, stuff like that. And then the work situation started to become more and more kind of sexualized. And then the boundaries were being tested, and it's going from there. So this is kind of still ongoing. Leticia is out of the situation and receiving services and things like that. Touching on why she's not just able to kind of leave, or why a labor trafficking victim may not just be able to leave in general, or why can't they just kind of walk out the door. There may have been false promises. In extreme cases, there may be some type of captivity. There was certainly threats against friends and family. If they were to leave, this is what I'll do to your family. I know your family. They may not know they may not know their whereabouts or the resources needed to leave. They may have had their documents confiscated, so they don't have their passport, maybe they don't speak the language, things like that. They may have some type of debt bondage or hidden fees that they're needing to pay off. Fears of deportation. They may not identify as a victim. They may distrust law enforcement or anybody in authority in general. And then on the sex trafficking side, this is kind of a general process of how the process kind of plays out. So we talked about recruitment before. So a lot of times there is a recruitment phase, lured by love, safety, belonging, money. This could be in person, it could be online. It could be in the setting of somebody posing as an intimate partner or some type of caretaker or something like that. It could be a friend, it could be a family member, it could be an uncle, it could be really anything. But this kind of recruitment starts the process. And then after the recruitment happens and the potential victim is bought into some type of situation, maybe they agree to only engage in the acts once or twice to make quick money so they can take a trip together or something like that. And that's when a lot of the grooming happens. So this phase could last a while. So after the recruitment, there's time invested in building trust, building rapport, and this is where the sexual boundaries are kind of tested. So maybe that means that the trafficker may invite friends and family over for the first time, and then kind of slowly testing the boundaries to kind of expand the horizon of what the situation would lend itself to. And then eventually the situation would turn to full-on trafficking, and quotas are set and promises. Maybe the promise, it'll only happen for a short time and things like that. So again, every situation is unique, but this is kind of how it plays out in a general sense. There's some nuances involved in it, but this is kind of how it plays out. And then it's important to note too that there's a lot of people that are engaging in sex work, but they're not being sex trafficked. That is a distinction that has to be made. There may be somebody engaging in sex work to survive or to pay their rent, or maybe support habits, or there's been normalization of sex work in their family or things like that. And really the difference between the two is that force, fraud, and coercion piece that we talked about. If somebody's being trafficked, they're not in control of their money. They're being forced to do it, and they haven't chosen it as a profession or a means to make money and survive. Now, there's obviously dangers in both. They both have serious physical and mental health concerns. There's safety concerns, but again, there's just a kind of a distinction to be made between the two, if that makes sense. Reasons somebody might be involved in sex work, again, they may have entered the sex work based on family history, normalization of sex work. They may enter sex work due to the lucrative nature of it. And then it's just kind of important figuring out safety measures and stuff like that. And really kind of figuring out that force, fraud, and coercion to if they're just a person working in sex work or a victim of sex trafficking. So here are some, again, thinking of the indicators, some indicators of sex trafficking. On the physical side, maybe some unwanted pregnancies, maybe bruising or burning in hidden areas, STIs, other physical indicators that might lend itself to what happened in the trafficking situation. And then generally, maybe they're not enrolled in school frequently or they're absent. Maybe they have excessive amounts of cash or hotel keys and cards. Maybe they have a prepaid cell phone. Maybe they talk about they have a controlling partner. Maybe they have unexplained tattoos or expensive items that just kind of pop up. These are, again, these don't all kind of by themselves say, oh my gosh, it's trafficking, but together, if you take a comprehensive look, you can kind of start to learn if it may or may not be. And then here is a case study that our office saw. This was a couple years ago. At age 11, another Milwaukee case. At age 11, Alicia ran away from an abusive home. I think her father was absent. I think her mother was doing heroin at the time. Alicia found belonging in an older boyfriend who was 19, Justin. And the names are protected, obviously. He promised to give her safety and belonging, something that she obviously didn't have at home. And Justin started to gain her trust, offering her these things, this sense of safety, this sense of comfort, this sense of belonging. And she feels protected and secured with him. And then he eventually starts the process of introducing her to commercial sex and what that looks like. So, and this was I think they eventually were, there was kind of eventually an intervention in Madison. So again, they were kind of mobile, traveling throughout the state. Again, this is on the younger side of what I would say is, not to throw out an average, but this is definitely on the younger side. But this kind of scenario of fleeing a violent situation, finding belonging in something, and dealing and accepting the exploitation based on what the violence that they fled, I would say that's a fairly normal situation, or how it plays out. Does that make sense? And then as far as why they may not leave as well, a lot of the same issues, lack of knowledge of whereabouts. They don't identify as a victim. For the younger people, they I don't think that they fully understand like what exploitation is. They think that it's something that they're doing because maybe their family member did it, or a friend is doing it, or it's what the kids are doing, or something like that. I think that's what we're kind of feeling in Milwaukee. So when we look at Milwaukee, I don't think we fully understand the scope of the issue because not everyone is saying, I'm a victim. So, and then maybe they have for physical health, there's legal issues or prior legal issues to leaving, and things like that. And then again, talking about the intersection between sex trafficking and labor trafficking, there definitely is an intersection. A lot of times it starts as labor trafficking and turns into sex trafficking or vice versa. And if you really think about it, sex trafficking is a forced labor issue. They're being compelled to offer their labor for the sake of revenue and whatever their trafficker is demanding. So, and then just talking about like as you're kind of looking and interacting and maybe like starting to ask some questions to potential victims, just keep it in mind of the trauma that they've experienced and kind of what that does on how they speak and how they interact and how they kind of go about life. And this is just trauma-informed care, just a very kind of basic word of an overarching theme of thinking through people's traumas. It's an overarching framework that emphasizes the impact of trauma and guides the general organization behavior of an entire system. Again, so that could be, if you look at the whole, in Wisconsin, the whole model of the business of trafficking, there could be a lot of, and the transient nature as well, there could be a lot of different businesses and communities that could interact with a victim. You know, we have some people from the faith community here, hotel owners, carpenters, you know, really anybody and everybody is not immune to the effects of trafficking. So just being aware of that trauma, emphasizing safety, offering opportunities to rebuild control, and focusing on strengths rather than deficits. So, and it's just kind of what we say, a robust understanding of the unique trauma experiences of trafficking victims may change the way you interpret behavior. And then the impact on mental health. So it's a form of interpersonal trauma that has significant mental health impacts on survivors. So we've all kind of experienced, I'm sure we've all experienced some form of trauma in the room. From what we hear and what we experience through some of our survivors of trafficking is the long road to kind of recovery and sustainability and independence really begins after they've left the situation. Now they have a ton of traumatic experiences to deal with. They may have no job skills, they may have no housing, they may have no money to their name, and they're really starting from the ground up. And a lot of the focus is on the day-to-day housing, regaining vocational skills, but you can't really do that until you fully have the capacity to think through those things, and that doesn't happen until you really work on some of the trauma experiences that have happened. So again, the psychological consequences of trafficking often reverberates through the survivor's life for many years after the trafficking itself ends. This is why when you think through communities, like trauma-informed communities, knowing what trafficking does to survivors is just really important. These are some common concerns that we see. Depression, anger, PTSD, complex PTSD, self-harm, substance use, and pre-trafficking developmental trauma exposure. What that means is that the grand majority of victims of trafficking have experienced some type of childhood adversity. So, and if you have, that kind of that sets you up to be more vulnerable to exploitation. So these are just kind of some things we're seeing. And then psychological coercion. So again, we kind of talked about this of like the freedom of movement piece. Why can't victims just leave the situation? Maybe they have their documents. Maybe the door is unlocked. Maybe they can do all of those things. But why aren't they able to just kind of exit the situation? And this is kind of why they're not. The installation of fear is a major method of control utilized by traffickers. And this comes through threats, through legal threats, through forms of control that kind of psychologically has been gripped to that situation. So it's not as cut and dry of you can just flee the situation. Sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't. And this is just kind of how that plays out. Won't spend too much time on this, but the environment of threat is during the kind of trafficking situation, there's a lot of unpredictable stress, isolation, deprivation of basic needs, and then the short-term response to that is survival, immediate psychological, emotional survival responses that kind of take their toll, and then there's consequence of the chronic stress and trauma. and then eventually, you know, the identity is lost, decreased efforts toward resistance of the situation, and then the cycle just kind of continues to play out. So, so yeah, that's kind of how they're kind of kept in the situation. And then trauma bonding, which is also called Stockholm syndrome, identification with the perpetrator, is when the victim has some type of fondness to their trafficker that was created by the time of exploitation. Maybe the trafficker has bounced back between affection and threats, and that's created this unhealthy attachment to the trafficker, which the clinical term is trauma bonding. So as they're in the situation, they're doing what the trafficker says. Maybe he or she gives them some rewards from time to time, indulges them, but also threatens them and their family and such. And that kind of creates a psychological attachment to them. How this kind of plays out is a lot of times victims will, when they're referring to the trafficker, they'll use the term boyfriend instead of like trafficker or whatever the perpetrator, whatever the case may be, because they'll still have some type of fondness or good thoughts. They'll reflect on the good times, although there was severe exploitation as well. Safety planning, you know, just briefly, you know, if you were to maybe interact with a victim, they explain maybe the type of exploitation they're going through. It's always important to come up with a safety plan, talking about while they're in the situation, during the process of leaving, once they have left. Maybe you provide them with resources to, if they were to disclose as a victim and come out, this is who you call, this is who you should refer to, but always focusing on safety, always, because sometimes they might not be ready to leave, but you should talk about how they'll stay safe in whatever situation they're in. And then just closing up here, and then we can have questions. So screening, this is a lot of what our office does. So like, so if anybody, we're a statewide program, if anybody thinks they have a victim and needs some help screening to see if it's a victim or not, we're able to come out and do that. So this is just some of our questions we ask. Has anyone forced you to engage in sexual acts in exchange for money? Do you feel safe? Do you feel that you're watched or guarded? This just kind of unpacks that force, fraud, and coercion, and then on the labor side as well. And then as far as the needs of victims, they're obviously they're very vast. On the emergency side, we need crisis intervention and counseling, shelter, referrals, urgent medical care, safety planning, case management, interpretation housing. There's some immigration remedies from foreign nationals that I'll touch on. A lot of times there are criminal cases that victims have picked up throughout the course of the trafficking situation, maybe drug charges or prostitution tickets or whatever the case may be. And then for foreign nationals, these are some of the legal remedies that the TVPA, the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, which was signed in 2000, made possible. So for foreign nationals, if they're a victim of trafficking, they're provided continued residence, a T visa or a U visa as well, which are basically trafficking visas where they're able to stay here and work on residency and work on citizenship eventually and stuff like that. And then just to give a plug, we have a co-brand with Lotus Legal Clinic, and they offer legal services to statewide, but victims 13 and up. So they'll do things like they're able to expunge prostitution charges, they're able to work on immigration relief for people, just kind of work through the whole court proceedings and stuff like that. And then as far as how you can help, receive more training, maybe receive deeper training when it comes to screening or when it comes to, really assisting victims. Discuss the issue, encourage others to seek training, volunteer, and then obviously identify and refer suspicious activity in regards to trafficking promptly. So, and here are just some numbers. This is the human trafficking hotline. So that's a 24/7 hotline. I use it a lot, even if you have like a question like, hey, this is a potential scenario. The human trafficking hotline always is able to give resources and guidance. I mean, this is our 24/7 crisis line that is bilingual. So if you have a situation as well, you can call either or both or whatever the case may be. So, any questions?
Can you go back to that thing?
Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Are trafficking victims still able to submit compensation through the Attorney General's office?
Yeah, yep, they are. Yep, and that's something Lotus helps with as well. So we have lawyers we work with. We have a legal advocate who's here, Melly, and she can assist in that too. So there's restitution involved and stuff like that. So
Because that's a great.
yeah. So I don't know how like successful that is or what the nuances of that are, but it's definitely still a position.
Because I want to say they go back 36 months.
Yeah, and I think like Lotus, for example, they're always thinking of creative ways to get restitution. Like maybe they add up the amount of time worked within the trafficking situation, and that's the amount they're owed or whatever. You know, it's always kind of different. So.
What is that website in blue?
Oh, that's just acf.hhs.gov/trafficking. It's just like the Department of Children and Families trafficking like,
That's our
information
green
page.
cat.
Yep.
Josh, maybe what we can do is we can get this information from you guys.
Yeah.
And
I
then
can send out the
we'll
slides.
Email it out
Yeah.
as long as you guys sign in.
Oh, that would be.
Oh,
yeah.
cute.
Like I'm trying to clip them
Yeah.
on. I'm probably not even going to show up.
Any other questions?
What encourages our area to be a traffic center?
What's that?
What encourages our area to be a traffic center?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. So Milwaukee, I think Milwaukee is definitely vulnerable to trafficking, and it's kind of in the media. It's kind of exposed as the hub or the training grounds for pimps and stuff like that. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but I do know it's happening frequently here. And the reason that is, you know, in Milwaukee itself, there are some more low-income neighborhoods that are vulnerable to young people being vulnerable to exploitation. From like a more macro level, we have Chicago in our south that there's an influence from there. We've interacted with girls that come up, they're sent up from Chicago to work here as well, and then out west, the Twin Cities are influenced as well. Yeah, and in Wisconsin as a whole, we have a good highway system. We have, you know, some hospitality, some tourism around the state. We bring in a lot of foreign guest workers. So, yeah, all that to say, there's a lot of vulnerabilities that kind of lend itself to human trafficking happening here. So, I think the only way to really kind of combat that is to have more people know what it is, what it looks like, to create more exposure. Just as simple as that sounds. But.
Who would you contact if you wanted to volunteer?
You can just call us and ask for me or ask for the trafficking program. That's 414-389-6510. Mm-hmm.
So going back to your the agricultural visas, how long are they good for? And when they do, expiration date comes up, who's responsible for being renewed?
Yeah. Yeah, so the H-2A visas are regulated through the U.S. Department of Labor. We have a rep that we work with in Chicago. His name is Brooks. And they generally are about a year-ish, depending on what the crop is or what the farm is and things like that. It could be like 10 months to 14 months. So what happens is a lot of times they're recruited in a foreign country and they're given a promise of a certain wage, which the wage for the H-2A program is a federally mandated wage. It's like $13 or something like that. And there's a lot of policy surrounding the program that's not great. So workers will come here, are promised a lot of stuff, and then it doesn't happen. Like they're not paid, or they're threatened, or there's like 8 to 10 guys in one hotel room, things like that. So there needs to be more regulation throughout the visa, not just like up front. So when they're over, though, the U.S. Department of Labor, generally gets everybody home and things like that. And generally, like H-2A workers don't overstay their visas because they want to come back the next year because they rely on that money for their family in Mexico or wherever. So, yeah, we, again, not to say all H-2A workers are trafficked, but our program has seen like 3 to 4 big, large cases in Wisconsin through that program. So, within the past couple of years, so a couple of seasons.
Will there be any training opportunities for people who work in the hotel industry to identify potential victims of trafficking, what
Yeah.
to look for and such?
Yeah, if you, again, I can send out my email or however we want to do that, but we, our staff is able to come out and train anybody, anywhere throughout the state. So if you guys, we have a few hotels that will want to round up and do some training, we're able to do that. Anyone else? Okay. Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. And to the question about could other trainings be available? So the Gateway to Milwaukee, if we hear from our businesses and that's what they're looking for, we'd be happy to kind of reconvene that and kind of have a second phase of the training. So we can work with Josh and the hotels and anyone else that's interested to try to put something like that together fairly quickly. So if you are interested in participating in something like that, maybe stop at the registration table on your way out, and so we can get your name and contact information, and we can look to putting that together in the near future. Did this ring true with a lot of, particularly the hotel representation here? I mean, not only people staying at your hotel, but maybe even staff that maybe have friends or family or people in those situations. I mean, is this something that you guys see, or now that you've heard about it, are you going to look for? I mean, I would think so. We have one of the larger hospitality groups here in the state, here on the airport. So I hope that's of value to everyone. Again, we're happy to have everyone. It's kind of a double-edged sword. It's unfortunate that this is one of our better attended events, but again, we're happy to have Josh out here through UMOS, great organization. Little housekeeping. So we're going to take a break now, about 10 minutes. We'll get some coffee, get the blood moving, come back, and then we're going to have some guests from Milwaukee Police Department start on the active shooter training.
When they come back, they need to be in their industry.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Lori. So if you didn't hear that, MPD wants you to kind of break up into industry types. So maybe what we'll do, since hospitality's probably the largest representation, we'll have you guys in the middle, and then maybe we'll have education over here, and then maybe faith-based and other over on this side. We'll make everybody move. How about that? All right, thanks. I know these guys have already been handing stuff out and chatting with you guys, but I wanted to take a moment to introduce them. We have Josh Dumont and Carlos Felix. Josh has been with the force for 10 years, Carlos for 17, I believe, I overheard. So these guys aren't newbies. Yes, round of applause. They both have been with District 6 that entire time, which is pretty impressive. So these guys have definitely seen a lot of the situations we're talking about today, whether it be trafficking, active shooter, so on and so forth. They are our community liaison officers, so they're basically the community connection to the MPD District 6. See them around on a weekly basis, if not monthly or more, and these guys are heavily involved. They know everybody. It's their job to know everyone in the community. If you haven't met them already, definitely meet them before you leave. They are the connection to public safety in the area, and we're just happy to have them here. So I will hand it off to them. I think they need some mics. Testing, testing. Okay.
So we were passing out some packets, different industries, businesses. Raise your hand if you didn't get one. Okay, quite a few. We have 3 different kind of scenarios that we're going to go over. One's a hotel scenario, one's a kind of a restaurant, service industry, tavern, and then the other one is bank retail type. So raise your hand if you were in the hotel and if you got a packet. Raise the hotels. Okay, good. They're kind of all next to each other, which is good. We want to do. Raise your hands if you got the bank retail ones. Okay, back there. All right, just one last time. If you're in the hotel group, raise your hand. Hotel group, if you got a hotel packet, raise your hand. Okay. And then the bank retail group, couple. Okay. And then lastly, the restaurant one. Couple. Who had the restaurant packet? A few of you. Okay. When we get to this portion, we'll give you time to look at it and kind of hopefully group up closer to whomever is in your group. You guys can kind of talk it over, and then we'll discuss it all at the end. But we'll go over a little presentation here first before we do all that. Again, I'm Officer Josh Duman, District 6, Milwaukee Police Department. So this is our district that we do work out of. Carlos?
Hi. Hello, can you hear me? I'm Officer Carlos Felix, District 6. Thanks for having us today. So, you guys heard that there's going to be some human trafficking today, active shooter. Officers are going to come out and have all this information. It's going to be exciting. Those officers couldn't make it, so we were chosen to come out here. So thanks for having us. For the United States Department of Labor, over 2 million people are assaulted in the workplace, and a lot of those assaults are not reported. So, as you can see that little chart here, this was conducted through the FBI. Carl Chin put this together for the FBI, and it tracked data from 2000 to 2013. So, and the pie chart shows where certain industries are, and the number of percentage of assaults that they have. So, commerce, 45.6. So that would be pretty much anybody in the retail, hotel industry, service industry. Your government worker, 10.6. Healthcare facility, that's pretty low, 2.5. And house of worship, 3.8. So, and so on and so on.
So it just gives you a perspective of kind of the totality of these things that happen, kind of where they happen most. And Connie, if you could play video number 1 for us.
I can move that way. And right here in this video, it just shows you the workplace environment a couple of years ago. If you remember, Detroit, there was an active shooter.
The only thing right now, Blu-ray DVD.
As you can see, this gentleman walks in to the front office and to the district. Starts shooting with a shotgun. Goes out the door. You're gonna see him come back in. He's gonna jump right over that counter. See that officer down there doing everything he can to fight back and to try to escape. The only thing right now. Again, This one, really, scary situation because, again, this person's coming into a police department, and his intent is to kill people. And he knows, most people know officers are armed. He doesn't care. I believe he was being investigated for a sexual assault of a child. And he knew about it, so he came in and started shooting. Again, you see how he jumped over that counter. He didn't care if he lived or died that day, who he took with him. So a really scary situation. When this first came out a couple of years ago, it kind of, it touched me because your human lives being lost or the attempt to kill people. And not only that, it kind of looks like, he's coming into a police department. It kind of looks like the setup at District 6. And again, there's people working there, and he just jumps over that counter to take out whoever he can.
And obviously that's the police district. So that's a building with people with guns and are able to protect themselves a little better than just the general public. So if it's going to happen, there, it can happen anywhere, typically in a place possibly you work at. So it's just to get your mind going that this can happen anywhere, and just always kind of be thinking about that. How to just reduce workplace violence is kind of it's very general, but it's very important, especially to managers, business owners out there. The best protection for employees is a zero tolerance policy toward workplace violence. So if there's any thing between coworkers, or if there's a thing between you have someone staying at your hotel and the coworkers, to have zero tolerance, so that something doesn't build up and build up and build up to where now we've got these active shooter situations. So how do we get to that? How do we get to that point? Some triggers for violence that may occur at the workplace where you guys are at. Stressful conditions either at work or home. Okay, that's who doesn't have some sort of stress at either places, right? Conflict between coworkers, conflict at home. Lack of policies or training. Obviously, it's good that you guys are here now. You're kind of getting some sort of training here, but different policies for staff that you have, where there's not an understanding between you and staff or coworkers of what is expected of them. There's obviously gang activity that depends on maybe where you're located, where your facility is located, what's around in your neighborhood. Domestic disputes. This is a pretty popular one. This is where oftentimes you'll get a lot of active shooters that go into facilities of their ex or their current partner because they're dealing with things outside of work. It's not always because of what's happening in your business or what's happening with your coworkers in your business. A lot of these things spill over. So if you have someone that you work with that's having difficulties at home, obviously try to help them out, but also be aware that a lot of these situations start there. So thinking about that. Presence of firearms and other weapons. Do you have any firearms or different types of weapons at your facility? Now, the police district, obviously there's we have firearms there. You might not have firearms at your place of business, but there's, depending on if you're a manufacturing place or things like that, there are weapons. Inadequate security. Who here wishes they had more security where they work? Right? Even if you have good security, you always kind of feel like maybe you don't have enough. So that is always a concern. Working in isolated areas, people can be trapped. Thinking about where you work. If something happened, could you easily be trapped? A lot of active shooters that we've had, throughout our state, the country, they don't just sometimes randomly go to a place. They kind of stake it out. They have a good idea of the building. So if they know that there's areas where people can be isolated, you could be a target. Poor lighting, visibility, poor access or no access to emergency communication. So if you don't have phones, or if you have coworkers that aren't allowed to carry their cell phones on them, sometimes in schools or churches you might have that policy. So if they don't have that, and there's not a better access to phones out there, it's something to think about.
Again, just like Officer Duman said, the gang violence. Again, who your employees are, what's going on in their lives, where they're hanging out with. Sometimes that does spill over into the workplace. The domestic dispute, that's a big one too.
You guys want to switch mics maybe?
Can you hear me? Oh. All right, the domestic disputes, we know in the work environment, sometimes you don't want to give out too much information and because of rumor mills and everything else, but it's always good to let people know, hey, I'm going through something now. If you see this person coming here, let me know, or they shouldn't be around, call the police. It's just a little information that you share with your coworkers in the work environment just to make sure you're kind of on top of your game so you don't have that person coming in. And we always think about this because we see it on the news and it won't happen here. But look at the history of Wisconsin. We do have it. We have it here. The salon in Brookfield, that was a domestic dispute. So it has happened here. It can happen here. Church in Brookfield, it happened here. This goes back even further than that. We had an active shooter in '97 at the post office downtown, where a person came into work. He was upset with his manager and coworkers, and he shot his manager and a couple coworkers, and then took his life. So it can happen here. It has happened here. So that, yeah. And we've had the church shootings, the temple shootings. What do I need to do? Be aware of your environment. Take preventive measures. Be prepared in case of an emergency. So when you came in today, did you guys take a look to see where the nearest exit was? Everybody knows where the nearest exit is, right? There's one right there. Because if you can't get out the back door, where are you going? So look before entering new areas, so that you look when you came in here, if there was anything suspicious. Scan for anything that may be out of place. Did everybody do that when they came in? I do that when I walk into my house, my own house. I walk in, you've been gone all day from work, at work. You come home, who's in your house? Do you know if anybody's in your house? But we've had those things happen where people have come home, somebody's broken into their house, and unknown to that person, that burglar's still in their house. Scary situation to be in. Again, check for escape routes. Check for people that may be lurking around, anybody suspicious. Listen to what's happening around you. If you hear things, people talking, maybe arguments. Make sure no one is trying to evade security measures. So that person that kind of uses the back door to get in or do any of those things. And also report stuff. Would everybody in here report something if they seen something that was suspicious? Are you guys positive about that?
Yes.
All right. Well, we've done this before, Officer Duman and myself, just to see how people are paying attention. And we did it today, and nobody said anything. Did anybody say anything to you, Lee? No. A couple of you. What was that, sir?
Bag under your chair.
The bag under your chair. How long have you been sitting there? 10 minutes? But you were here. You were here earlier, right?
Up high.
Okay, you're up higher. So a few of you have bags by your chair.
Yeah, I actually picked it up and said, what is this bag?
Did you report it to anybody?
No, because somebody told me please put it there, don't leave it alone.
Oh. All right. The police put it there, leave it alone. So you sat there, even though somebody told you the police put it there. And I believe there are 2 officers in this building, and nobody's come up and asked us about that. So if you have a bag by your chair, can you pick it up? Brown paper bag. How many are there? There's 5 bags. You have one? You have one?
By the way, he asked you to carry it, but you're supposed not to carry it because we don't know what's on it.
So we have 2, yeah. Who else has a bag? Can you raise your hand? Right there. Anybody else? That's 4? 5 bags. We put those there. Were you sitting there earlier? You're over there. You're
Bag was over there.
Okay, but a few of you seen that earlier. It'd be something suspicious, right? Again, report. Nobody's reported. Just be aware of those things. Those are yours to keep. All right. There's something in the bag. So again, it's a little gift, and it's not going to hurt you.
So it's either we do this for kind of 2 reasons. The one, it's kind of to if you saw it, it's that report, or if you know it's even suspicious, just to say something, wherever you go. The other part of it is to, if you didn't see it, is to be a little more aware of your surroundings. Just like Carlos said, coming into a place, just scan, look around, and then maybe you'll see that eventually. And when you first kind of start doing it, it does take some practice when you're going into your workplace or even your home or this and that, just to mentally think about it. Okay, look around, look for things. As more often you do it, you'll just do it subconsciously, and you'll be actually doing it, but it won't be thinking about it. But in the back of your head, you're doing that, which is good.
In the bags, last time we did this, we had some nice little plush teddy bears that we gave out. We ran out of teddy bears, so actually we have gun locks in there. So if you own a gun, it's a gun lock. If you don't own a gun, give it to somebody and use it.
I can still carry this.
So going to the second point, the taking preventative measures, what can you do? Park in well-lit areas where you can be seen in plain view. You're not parking around the corner, or you're isolated, where you can be seen. Monitoring your bags, purses, and other items. That's just a good concept altogether, just to keep onto your things. There's obviously other criminals out there that will look for that just to take your items, but that's a good thing to think about. Always try to get a good look at everyone coming and leaving the area. So anyone that comes into your business or workplace, just looking at them, making a mental note. A lot of times it's all, she works here, he works here. This gentleman's different. Is he coming here to purchase something? Is he not? Just to think about it. Find out if anyone else is in the property. Typically, there's businesses out there that close, right? Making sure that you're going through your location, making sure there's no one else in the property. If you're in the hallways, especially a school, a business where it should only be employees, when you're going through those areas, making sure that there's not anyone in there that shouldn't be. And if you do see it, obviously say something. Don't get stuck in a routine. So if you leave, or if you come to work same time, go through the same door, the process that you have is kind of the same, is to just kind of change it up. Maybe leave 5 minutes later through a different door. Just different things that you can do to change it up, because as we talked about before, there's a lot of active shooters that will go in the place before they actually do the act, because they want to study, they want to see what people's environments are, what they are doing, and they'll coach themselves up on it. So if you're kind of changing it up differently, it's harder to case your business or what have you. Report suspicious activity, threats, unusual behavior. That's kind of the bag trick that we did. Report anything that's not right or doesn't even just feel right. If it's just weird to you, hopefully you have a good relationship with a manager or a coworker that you can kind of at least mention it to someone. Have follow-up security protocol.
Be prepared in case of an emergency occurs. Have an action plan. Run, fight, hide. We can't teach you these things. We can't say what to do. You know what you're capable of, and you know when to use these things. These are motor skills you've kind of used growing up, and you know what you can do. Some people have a good background in some type of fighting or some type, and they know how they can take care of themselves. Some people, all they know what to do is escape, and that's good. Sometimes you have to do that. Hide. You have to know where to hide. Again, if somebody would walk into this room, what are you going to do? Are you going to be the person to fight, run, or hide? And where do you hide? Hiding behind a screen, yeah, you can hide, but if there's really no cover there to protect you from anything. You hide in a closet and wait there. And things are, when you do these things, and let's say you have an action plan at work, what do? If you lock yourself up in a room to hide and you have a group of people with you, and 10 minutes later you hear somebody knocking on the door, and it's somebody you worked with for 10, 20 years, do you open that door? You don't see them. Hey, gosh, it's me, Carlos, open up, I got to get in, And you don't know that gunman probably has a gun to your coworker's head. So now you let that person in, and now you have a gunman there, and you're sacrificing yourself and everybody else in there. Know what your role is, and it may change at any time. If you work in the front office and your role is to call for police or when something happens, that could change. You could be somewhere else. And just because it's not my role to do that, I'm not going to pick up the phone and dial 911. Your role can change. If you're the person that runs to get the first aid box, and you can't do it right then and there, so everybody else is out because you're not there to grab the first aid. So your role can change anytime, and you have to be fluid with these type of situations. Refresh yourself and others with the action plan. We come up with a plan and we talk about it, and a year later it's kind of been filed away and nobody's talked about it or practiced or done anything. If your action plan is to have a code, you go over to Pager and you have a code word that you say when something may be suspicious or there may be a threat to people. If you have, some places will have like a code red or whatever. Whatever your code is, do you practice that, and does everybody know what it is? Have contact and emergency numbers available. I've been in a situation, I'm a police officer, and 911 is a real easy number to remember. But when the pressure is on and it's life-threatening, that 911 is a real hard number to remember sometimes. And just having it somewhere to see emergency and non-emergency numbers to call, that helps you out because it gets your mind back into the game. Because again, if you have things going on and now you have to call for help, you're like, well, who do I call? So again, if the office phone, if you have it posted somewhere so people know, you look right there, real easy to remember that.
Why don't you do video number 3 or 2?
It may feel like just another day at the office, but occasionally, life feels more like an action movie than reality. The authorities are working hard to protect you and to protect our public spaces. Sometimes bad people do bad things. Their motivations are different. The warning signs may vary, but the devastating effects are the same. And unfortunately, you need to be prepared for the worst. If you were ever to find yourself in the middle of an active shooter event, your survival may depend on whether or not you have a plan. The plan doesn't have to be complicated. There are 3 things you could do that make a difference. Run, hide, fight. First and foremost, if you can get out, do. Always try and escape or evacuate, even when others insist on staying. Encourage others to leave with you, but don't let them slow you down with indecision. Remember what's important. You, not your stuff. Leave your belongings behind and try to find a way to get out safely. Trying to get yourself out of harm's way needs to be your number 1 priority. Once you are out of the line of fire, try to prevent others from walking into the danger zone and call 911. If you can't get out safely, you need to find a place to hide. Act quickly and quietly. Try to secure your hiding place the best you can. Turn out lights, and if possible, remember to lock doors. Silence your ringer and vibration mode on your cell phone. And if you can't find a safe room or closet, try to conceal yourself behind large objects that may protect you. Do your best to remain quiet and calm. As a last resort, if your life is at risk, whether you are alone or working together as a group, fight. Act with aggression. Improvise weapons. Disarm him. And commit to taking the shooter down, no matter what. Try to be aware of your environment. Always have an exit plan. Know that in an incident like this, victims are generally chosen randomly. The event is unpredictable and may evolve quickly. The first responders on the scene are not there to evacuate or tend to the injured. They are well trained and are there to stop the shooter. Your actions can make a difference for your safety and survival. Be aware and be prepared. And if you find yourself facing an active shooter, there are 3 key things you need to remember to survive. Run, hide, fight.
Couple things on that. Again, whatever you have to do, you do. If you run out and you get away. Don't go stop by the front door and wait for police. Get clear away from the building. If you have to fight, again, you know what you're capable of. So if you have to fight, you do what you have to do to stay alive. If you hide, you wait until the police come get you. Police are coming to get you. An officer, somebody will be out.
Emergencies of any kind are
And they'll,
unpredictable. Northwestern has many safety
they'll be out
policies
there
in place
get you.
to deal with
So if
critical
you're down
situations.
and and you're hidden somewhere,
Northwestern
wait till they
Police
come get you.
go through
'Cause we will
extensive
come
training
get
to
you.
prepare for
Again,
the
just like the
possibility
video
of active
said.
violence, and a crisis management team is in place to manage critical
Just like the video
incidents.
said,
But even with
coming in to get you.
our safeguards
Again,
in
the
place,
priority
knowing
is to
how to
stop that
respond can make all the difference. Preparing for an emergency before one occurs makes you much more likely to be able to protect
Again, don't
yourself
come
and
out.
respond appropriately.
Your hand,
It's important to pay attention to
Seen
where
everybody
you
in the
are
video,
and think
hands up
through
high.
what you
Officers
could do
don't know who the
if a
threat
threat
is.
appears.
And again, they're going to come get you. And there's been incidences where people have hidden for hours. Because again, it's not where officers are just coming in and right away trying to find people. They're looking for that threat, and that threat could be anybody, and that threat could be anywhere. So they're doing their job as fast as they can. They have to be thorough about it to make sure they don't miss anything.
So that was obviously a good video, just information. But the next video we want to show you, Connie, if you want to load it up, just wait to push play. It's kind of a real life situation on which you can kind of apply those three principles, the run, hide, and fight. So you can go ahead and play that video, Connie.
The beginning of this story seems tragically familiar. An angry man interrupted a school board meeting in Panama City, Florida today, blamed them for firing his wife, and then leveled a handgun. He said he planned to die and apparently had every intent to kill. What you're about to see now is graphic, but what happened in the end was nothing short of astonishing. Business as usual stopped when 56-year-old Clay Duke stepped to the front of the room and began spray painting a wall with an ominous red symbol seen in the movie V for Vendetta.
The facial expressions on the board members kind of hinted that something odd was happening, and then I saw the gun.
Nadine Yanis, a reporter for local station WMBB, hit the floor as Duke ordered the women and children from the room. Moments later, board member Ginger Littleton sneaks behind Duke and tries to knock the gun from his hand with her purse.
If he wanted to kill her at that moment, he could have, and he didn't.
Duke lets her go, and tension builds as he rants at the male board members over a sales tax increase, while Superintendent Bill Husfeld tries to calm him.
Just listen to me for a minute. I don't want anybody to get hurt, and I've got a feeling that what you want is the cops come in and kill you because you're mad, because you see you're going to die today. But why? This isn't worth it. This is a problem. Please don't. Please don't. Please.
Duke fires wildly. 4 shots, all of them miss. He then crumples to the floor, shot from the back of the room by Chief of Security Mike Jones, a former detective. As he lay wounded, police say Duke then used a remaining bullet to take his own life.
Police were alerted immediately. They were there within minutes, and we had both the Bay County Sheriff's Office and the Panama City Police Department there working the scene.
Here's another look at the moment of horror, another reminder of just how miraculous it is no one else was hurt.
But why? This isn't worth it. This is a problem. Please don't. Please don't. Please. I'm going to kill you. Don't you understand?
We have reports that Mike Jones, the officer in the back of the room, was taken to the hospital for chest pains, but is okay. A lot of heroes in that room. Be sure to watch Good Morning America tomorrow
In
morning
that
for the
video, you got
latest
to
on
see
the
a little
story.
bit of everything. The run, fight, and hide. Seen the young ladies that were in the audience there, and a couple people kind of ducked down, crawled out of there. So they were hiding and running. Ginger, didn't have much, but she was fighting. And again, it's run, fight, hide. Don't freeze up. And the earlier video, they said to try to get people out of there. Sometimes people freeze up. That's sometimes normal under stress. So you might have to shake that coworker or something to wake them up and let them know it's time to go. Or again, we learned 9/11 that you have to fight. He said there he was going to die today. Somebody says, I'm going to die today, and they're holding a gun. It's not an April Fool's joke. Don't take it as one. That person probably wants to die today. either by their hand or somebody else's hand. So if a couple people would have just got up and helped Ginger out there, people may have still gotten shocked, but at least you would have had more of a chance taking this person out.
So what does an active shooter look like? Right. Anybody, right? These are all active shooters in our country here. You know, it doesn't matter who you are, what you look like, male, female. It's all different, right? So there's not one person that fits the description. So anyone that you think is suspicious in that time, you know, treat it as such.
Any gender, any race, any color, doesn't matter. There's hate in so many people, and again, you don't know what they look like. You see something suspicious, report it. All right, we got a couple scenarios. We'll give you guys, is 5 minutes enough to come up with a plan with your group? What we're looking for is 3 scenarios. You have the hotel, the retail, and bank scenario. The service industry scenario. There's a map on there. And does everybody have a pen or something? If you need one, I think there's some out in the hallway. We can get you some. What we're looking for is to come up with an action plan. And if you have a security plan already in place, if you want to use that or some of it, and just a couple examples of what you guys would do if there's an active shooter type situation. And then also, we know everybody, I know we get kind of tied up in this when you go to a training, they do the group projects, and everybody's like, oh, wow, great. We're going to have somebody from your group or a couple of you come up from your group and just kind of explain your group, your plan, your action plan, what you would do. So it's just to get you to think about these things and what happens and what you should do.
We'll give you a few minutes if you want to talk it over with someone in your group or have a lead in your group, or whatever scenario you have. So if you're not sitting by someone in your group, just try to find a seat near them and work as a group. We'll give you a few minutes and then we'll come together. All right, we'll start this up then. We'll start with the hotel scenario. I'll read it first, and then we'll get some input from what plans you guys have come up with. So, hotel scenario: you're a manager of a 3-story hotel. It's at 50% capacity. Majority of the guests are there for a business seminar. It's scheduled to start at 8 in the conference room. At 7:45, a customer exits the lobby and runs back from the parking lot. That person tells you someone with a gun just shot a person, and the armed person is walking towards the building. People start to exit the conference room and go towards the windows in the lobby facing the parking lot to see what the commotion is all about. So, what's your plan? How do you secure the safety of the guests and employees? How do you get help? And use examples of maybe things in your workplace that you use. So here's our hotel. Who would like to come up from the hotel group and share their plan? Or we can come down to you. Oh, there we go. All right, perfect.
I guess our first action plan would be to dial 911. That's the first thing we do from the front of the call. It would be to dial 911. Next, we try to make sure that everyone gets away from the window. If you're just a shooting, you're just a sitting target if you're standing right there in front of the window. Try to get first to get our guests to safety. At our hotel, they can exit out through the back way to the courtyard patio area. We can lock our doors from the front desk. I don't know if all hotels have that capability, but we can lock our doors with a little button. They can't get in. The next is just getting our guests safe, having them exit the building from the back into the courtyard area and have them exit towards the parking lot area or even towards the other, there's two different ways they can get out from the courtyard area. Keeping everyone calm. As a manager, we've got to make sure that all of our guests are safe. That would be our first priority. And then second, making sure that our employees are safe until the experts come to help secure the area and make sure everyone is safe.
No, that's good. It's good. It's just having a plan and trying to put it in place. And if you already have a plan, using some of those things, how would you feel if you and your family are at a hotel and hours later you find out that there was something going on and all the hotel employees just left? You can't abandon ship sometimes. You got to watch out for your customers and others there. Any other hotel? No other hotel?
We pretty much had the same idea that they had with the 911, corral everybody away from the window towards the back of the building. But I really do think that we do need a security plan, so if you guys could come over and help us with that, we definitely need one. So, yeah. So, I mean, we have a whole pool area, we have a bar, we have, offices, I mean, conference rooms. So we have, and the building is as you know, it's very long, it doesn't face the airport, it's very long. I mean, it's a complicated building, and we do have third floor, but you can't really tell when you're inside the pool area that there's 3 floors. So, and then we have one elevator, which is, it's very far away from the lobby, as well. So we do have a lot of stairwells, I will say that. We do have a lot of those, but.
That's what to think about. I mean, do you come into work and do you try to figure out, do you think about those things, where to hide if something happens, where to exit? And this exercise is just to get you to think about these things, and it can happen. There was a conference today, we are in a hotel, so thank God none of the other stuff happened today, so just to think about this thing, anything can happen anytime. Any other hotel?
So, talk to the wisdom of, for evacuation and motion to pull the fire alarm. I say, talk to the wisdom of pulling the fire alarms in order to evacuate your guests and also to cause commotion, hopefully dissuading the perpetrator from doing anything because all of a sudden he hears alarms going off. What do you think about that?
What do I think about that? I don't, and not to knock your idea there, but when you hear a fire alarm, what's your first reaction? It's to get out, right? Get out and run. But now let's say you're somewhere secure, locked room, somebody pulls that fire alarm, you're trying to get out, now you run into a guy with a gun where you could have been safe in your room. And that's why it's a little different with a fire alarm versus an active shooter, because there's a couple things to think about. Because now you're running into that sight of that gunman. So if you work in a company or a business that has areas that are locked off, the best thing is probably to lock down until, help comes. Again, you don't want to run out to an open area and it's kind of easy pickings then.
Use of a code word on the PA system.
Yeah. Yeah, and the code words, those help out. Only problem with that is when you have that employee that's a disgruntled employee, but still using those code words because you know what they are. And you can't just say, hold on, Mike, and then go over to put a code word, because then now you might. So you got to pick and choose how you're going to do these things. And if you work close with somebody, like we do, somebody works in the front office with you or whatever, and at least you have your code words. You can say that you know that something's wrong so your coworker can go and get that help. The code words are good. Anybody else in the hotel industry? One of those scenarios?
All right, move on to the next. I think you touched on a lot of important ones, but this is the bank retail scenario. Highly volatile employee has been fired for theft and violence at the business. You were a witness for 2 restraining order hearings that covered a coworker and the place of business. At a 3rd restraining order hearing, the ex-employee did not show up. but knows that there is to be no contact with you and the others or the business. This person is known to have multiple firearms and did not make threats to harm you, other workers, and stated they don't care if they die. They did make threats. Today, someone showed you a Facebook post where this employee has a gun and stated, "Today is the day." You and the other coworkers are in the business with several customers. A fourth coworker enters the business at noon and runs to tell you that the ex-employee is in the back parking lot getting something out of his trunk. So a little bit of a backstory, but obviously a lot of information where if you were to see this person, you know, you're on alert. So this is what you're dealing with. Who had this scenario and wants to kind of share their plan?
We're back here, we put the plan together.
So we have the bank. But there's a lot of things going on here. First off, since you knew that he wasn't going to comply with these restraining orders, I think what you would have done previous is let all employees know what the situation is, even before this day occurred. So every management team member should be aware of it. Second, be notified that this situation may occur. I would definitely reach out to my local police that we work with. For us, we work in Brookfield, so I'd probably contact their Brookfield Police Department so they're aware. Maybe they want to set up some kind of surveillance that day. Once notified of the Facebook post, I'm going to take things a little bit more seriously. I'm probably going to close down my office for the time being. If I still had customers in my office, the safest place I could go is my vault. It's bulletproof. I have alarms in the vault. So if I hear somebody coming into that area, I'm going to hit my alarms. I'll probably hit my alarms anyways, and I have them in multiple areas. Because again, I want to keep my customers and my employees safe. That's my first priority. Oh, and getting back to that, I'd lock all the doors. Locking all the doors is the first thing. Very first thing to do. If I notice someone's in my parking lot that's threatening me, doors are being locked.
Oh, yeah. We were gonna secure anybody who was disabled or handicapped and get them into the vault first, before we lock anybody else into the vault because it's bulletproof. Because we're taking it that it was a bank.
And that's good. And the backstory on that, we kind of went into little details about the restraining order and stuff like that, because it's a disgruntled employee or whatever. Armed subject comes into a bank, it's a bank robbery. You know, it can turn into an active shooter or any other business. So we kind of just wanted to give that backstory as more, hey, you're seeing this coming, because you never know who walks into a business with a hidden weapon or no, you can't predict that. But now you know this employee is not supposed to be there, made threats to harm you and other employees, which was good because you said, I'm going to share that information. And if you see that person out there, you're going to start to react. So you kind of have a heads up, and other employees have that heads up that this may be coming. So.
That's really important too for hotels. I worked in a larger hotel where when employees just to add for hotels, I worked at a larger hotel, and when employees were fired, all managers were made aware that this person doesn't belong on property for 90 days. If you see this person on property, to alert someone.
And that's good that you're using it for hotels. It's just not, all these ideas can be used and transferred over to whatever type of business work that you do. And it's good that you're doing that and sharing that information with employees. Any other retail or bank scenarios? I know everybody loves doing these exercises.
All right, we'll move on to the last one here. Service industry, restaurant type. Tonight the business is near capacity and there's a large party in one section. Intoxicated person harasses the people at the party and a fight breaks out. You and your staff break up the fight and escort the intoxicated subject out of the business as that person makes threats to come back and kill everyone. The two other people involved were told for their safety to wait a few minutes before leaving. A few minutes later, you hear items breaking and yelling coming from the kitchen. An employee runs out from the kitchen yelling, and then you hear gunshots. So last group, who would like to share their plan?
Do you guys have these?
No.
Anybody else on this?
Oh. Here.
So I'll start this with neither of us has really worked in the restaurant industry or any industry where we'd be in charge of all these people and their safety. But when we started looking at this, the first thing we said is I think we would have made a call earlier on, especially when someone's threatening to come back and kill everyone. And you're taking it the step further where you're saying that you want people to wait and you're separating people. You could have called then and just gotten a heads up. It's not probably a priority one at that point, but to let them know that you have an incident possibly. As soon as we heard the items breaking and the yelling, what we talked about doing is making sure as many people as possible could get out that main entrance, because if you look at on our map, there's an exit in the kitchen where it sounds like whatever is going on there. So trying to get people out the main entrance as quickly as possible, making sure someone's calling right away. We said, there's cell phones, but also we're guessing by the front there'd probably be like a hostess stand or something, and there should be a phone there. So notifying that an incident is occurring, getting people out, and then we talked about probably having to barricade that kitchen entrance in the back, because you want to keep whatever's going on back there, and you feel bad for whoever's in there, but they have places like the cooler or the office where they can barricade, and just trying to make sure anyone in the main area gets out before it spills out. That's kind of where we were at.
Yeah, that was really good. I like the part that you mentioned, barricading the kitchen where it's happening. You feel for the people that might be in there, but you're kind of, understanding that if you don't do that, now you might be putting out everyone else in danger. It's kind of like when Carlos had mentioned before, if you're in a situation like that and someone knocks on the door and they say, "Oh, it's me, Johnny," you don't know what's really on the other side. So kind of taking that principle is good.
Does anybody else want to share? Any scenarios?
Can you just address the fatal funnel principle on how the best places to hide? Can you address the best places to hide when you're barricaded in a room, like the fatal funnel?
The fatal funnel, that's a technical term. If you guys don't know what that is, if these were walls, this would be the fatal funnel. Coming in through a doorway is the fatal funnel. That's what we call it in law enforcement. They come in through this door, you just have the silhouette here. If you're running, you hear gunshots, just don't run blindly. You want to be quick about it, but want to make sure you're paying attention to what you're doing. Again, you just don't run out anywhere. Coming through a doorway, fatal funnel. That silhouette's right there, easy target. When we in law enforcement train to enter a room, we don't just come in through a door and stand right there. Again, because you're putting yourself in harm's way. Somebody starts shooting, they're shooting at the center of that door, down that hallway. That's the fatal funnel. So when you exit, you want to pay attention to where you're running into. You don't want to run into a hot zone where, again, there's a gunman. And in a lot of these, few of these situations, there's been more than one gunman. So again, you want to be quick about it, but pay attention to where you're going. I always tell my little girl this too, is if you're going down a hallway, don't walk down the center, kind of meter, kind of go around so you get a better view of what's around the corner. Try not to rub against the wall so you're making noise and things like that. Quiet and quick and out. So those things. And I know in a couple of our scenarios we talked about, guy posted it on Facebook. That just happened. There was an active shooter where he was live streaming. This is the world we live in today. People are doing these things. You see those threats out there. Again, report it and do something about it.
Question. The people mentioned this scenario, the person said, I'm going to come back and fill that room. And say, all right, we're going to call the police and tell them that person said that. What is the police response to someone saying, someone said they were going to come back and fill
Well, it depends on the situation, depends on what happened prior, but if you contact the police that someone threatened someone, we're gonna come and investigate it. Even if you might think it's a baseless threat, or if it's something where something major occurred and they told you that they're gonna come back and shoot you, anywhere in between there, if you contact the police department, we'll be coming. Obviously, if there's a big brawl, kind of in this last scenario, and he says, I'm going to kill you, I think we'll probably get there pretty quickly, depending, because of the circumstances. But we will respond.
I know on the news, it actually was on the news last night, and we kind of had this one on one of our slides for our monthly meetings that we do, crime meetings for the general public. But last night on the news, they showed a picture of a man, had a business not too far from here in our district, 700 block of West Layton, where he was asked to leave the bar. He left, he came back, put a gallon of gas, and lit the side door on fire while there were people inside. So he didn't really make any threats or anything, but if he would have said, he was at the bar and said, I'm coming back to do something, report it. We're here for that. It's not that you're bothering the police or anything like that. But if you don't report it, law enforcement doesn't know that it ever happened.
Any other comments about this one, or any questions? Yep.
So, I call, I make a threat, and I call the police. What kind of information do you guys want to know from the public about the threat?
Well, we're going to obviously want to know what was said, who said it. If you don't know who they are, a description of them, where you last saw them, did they leave the business, are they still here? The best description you can of this situation, and definitely of the person that made those threats. All right, any other questions before we head out here? Any general questions or about the scenarios or anything? Yeah, in the back.
For the hotels, would they dial 911 or would they call the non-emergency number? Kind of depends on the situation.
Well,
yeah, 911 obviously is an emergency, an active threat, life-threatening situation. It's actively happening. If you have an active fight, something of that nature, you're going to dial 911. Non-emergency, that's the number you're going to call for more of like suspicious activity, or you have a problem person at your business who's not necessarily actively fighting, but maybe is being difficult and needs the police there, you're going to call the non-emergency number. Or if you're reporting, a burglary that's occurred and done with, or a theft or a property damage that's not actively going on, would call non-emergency.
And we get a lot of calls subject for guns. Years ago, we used to go red lights and siren to go and stop this person because somebody's seeing somebody walking down the street with a gun. The laws have changed. You have carry concealed now in Wisconsin. It's been for a few years. We still get those calls. People will say, hey, there's a guy walking down the street with a gun and a holster on their hip. We still go because we have no choice that we have to go. But again, laws have changed. People have the right to do that now. They've always had. They just kind of put it out there and said, you can do this. But a private business, if you do not allow weapons, do you call the police? If the person just comes in with a gun holstered on their hip. If you don't allow weapons in your business, you ask them to go secure their weapon. They're not allowed there with weapon. They do that. It's not a police call then. But if there's threats and other things that follow this, I would say that's a police call. And again, these exercises that we did were just to see how you would think under pressure. And there's no pressure here because it's just on black and white on paper. But what would you do? And these are things that you probably should start thinking about. If you don't have an action plan, try to get one in place. If there's not an action plan with the business, if you have a coworker that you sit up front at a desk with all day or whatever you do, maybe have something between you two. Know if something's happening. Or if there's an employee that you're not too sure of and you know they're possibly getting fired, they're going through stuff at home, they have all those stressors in their life. When you see something, that you and your coworkers know that it's time to do something. Doesn't mean you have to fight, but just some type of action, maybe reporting something.
Yes?
One thing I would say, since obviously everyone has a cell phone these days, is I've had suspicious activity around my home, and what I've done in the past is gotten my cell phone, taken a picture of that person, and taken a picture of their plates. If they're far enough from me and they don't see me anyway, I just take it real quick. And that's what's helped me when I've ended up in situations where I've had to call the police.
Yeah, that's a good point. We've obviously had people do that, you know, you go on scene as an officer and they've got pictures on their phone, license plates, which is all terrific. Just like you mentioned at the end, though, just make sure that you're doing it in a safe manner.
Right.
You know, if you have a suspicious car, you know, in your parking lot or on the street, that you're not, you know, walking in front of it, and so they can plainly see you, and, you know, just being smart about it, which is good.
Any
Go ahead.
other advisement if you're trapped in a scenario and there's like a very loud individual in your hiding spot that seems unconsolable to be quiet?
Yeah, that's a decision you have to make in the moment, right? Because that'll happen. I mean, that'll happen. People are different, are wired differently. You might have that where someone is just openly sobbing or screaming or crying, and you're trying to hide. At that moment, you have to think, you know, do I stay here and try to get this person to be quiet, or do I take my chance and try to go somewhere else? Do you prepare yourself to, if you don't feel like leaving is appropriate, do you prepare yourself to fight if someone enters? So it's kind of in that moment you kind of have to make that decision. All right, well, we thank you guys for listening to us. Hopefully you got some good information. We'll stick around for a little bit if you guys have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I just want to leave you with this right here. One more video is a real short video. It's just about having an action plan. You can see the title on there, Burglar Escape Savage Dog. No matter how big or small your action plan is, have one in place if it's security or whatever it is. But this is one kind of a security measure here. So you can play it now. Again, this is a guy attempting to burglarize a house. Kind of wandering around a yard, and he's going to meet up with the security system, which is a savage dog. Might be a little graphic, so. So again, just having an action plan and using that plan if you need to. Thanks.
I have one more announcement for you guys related to this suspicious video here. So the Gateway to Milwaukee, in partnership with MPD and actually another business improvement district, fall of last year partnered with Ring Incorporated. Everyone familiar with Ring? They do security cameras and systems. So through that program, we got a pretty heavy discount with Ring and purchased a whole bunch of cameras to distribute to residents and businesses and other stakeholders in our general district area. Big success. We distributed about 100 residential cameras at an event in November, and we distributed between the two districts probably about 50 business cameras. So we're looking at a phase 2 of that. Probably it's going to happen mid-summer. So if you guys are interested in potentially connecting with that program, receiving one of those cameras, the caveat is that if MPD needs to access that feed because something happened in the area, because generally these cameras are going to be street-facing or parking lot-facing cameras, that then you agree to provide that footage. They wouldn't have 24-hour access, but you can provide that footage to MPD. And through that agreement, then you have access to this free camera. You can mount it on your residence or your business. And we've had a number of wins already, just in a few months since the program launched. And like I said, we're looking to do a phase 2. So if you're interested, again, leave your contact information. Maybe make a little note that that's the thing that you would like to hear more about. And we'll be sure to get that information out. I want to thank everyone for coming. If you have ideas for other trainings or different directions to take this in the future, let us know. We always try to tweak it and add different things to add value every year. So Thanks again, and happy day.